My Amish wedding night was delayed 3 days. No one would tell me why the lamp is still burning on the dresser when Eli closes the door behind him. I can hear his breath. Mine won't come. The wick smells like kerosene, and the cotton of my new nightgown is too stiff against my collarbone, the kind of stiff that scratches when you swallow. He stands by the wash basin. I sit on the edge of the bed. Neither of us moves, he says. Sarah, Ma'am said we should just sleep tonight. I nod like I understand. I don't. The quilt under my hand is the double wedding ring pattern my Aunt Lydia stitched, and there's a small brown spot near my knee. Coffee, I think, from the morning she finished it. I keep staring at that spot like it might tell me something. Outside, a horse shifts in the barn. The third stair from the top creaked when he came up. I remember that because, no, wait, it didn't creak. He must have stepped over it. He knew to step over it, and I didn't know he knew, and somehow that was the first thing that scared me. He blows out the lamp. 3 days. That's how long we slept in the same bed without touching. And no one, not my mother, not his, not the bishop's wife who braided my hair that morning, would tell me why. Quick pause. My name is Sarah, and this is Rebecca Amish Home. If these stories stay with you, if they make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it's the reason I can keep telling them. Tell me in the comments, what's something nobody warned you about until it was already happening to you? And if you want to go further, a super chat or a membership, that's you telling me these voices are worth hearing. That keeps this going. Now, back to what happened. In the old order, a girl is not told what happens on her wedding night. That's not a rule anyone says out loud. It's just the air you breathe. The reasoning, if you go back far enough, comes from a belief that knowing would be the same as wanting, and wanting before the vow is the door the devil walks through. So you keep girls clean by keeping them blank. That's the theology. Stripped down. Nobody ever said it to me like that. I learned it from the way my mother's mouth would tighten when one of my brothers laughed too loud at the dinner table, or the way the older women would change the subject the second a cow went into heat in the south pasture. Here's the thing that still knocks the wind out of me when I say it now. I was 19 years old, baptized, betrothed, and I did not know the word for what a body did on a wedding night. Not the word, not the shape of it, nothing. And it lived in the smallest things. The way Ma'am folded my nightgowns into the cedar chest with her face turned slightly away. The way Aunt Lydia would say, "You'll be a good wife," and then squeeze my shoulder a little too hard, like she was apologizing for something I couldn't see yet. I asked her once, I must have been 16, what it meant when the married women laughed. In the kitchen, after the men went out. She looked at me for a long second. Then she said, "Sarah, you'll know when it's your turn to know." And I let it go. We all let it go. Because the girls who didn't let it go, well, you heard about them. You heard about them in the way nobody finished the sentence. Eli Stoltzfus was 22 when we were published. No, 23. He turned 23 the spring before. I always get that wrong, because his birthday was so close to the wedding it blurred.
What the?
We'd known each other since Sing-Sings, but we didn't really know each other until the buggy started in the fall. He was quiet, the kind of quiet that wasn't shy, the kind that was just careful. He'd hold the reins with one hand and pick at the seam of his left sleeve with the other, over and over. I noticed it the first night and never stopped noticing it. My sister Mary pulled me aside 3 weeks before the wedding. She said 13 words. I counted them later. She said, "He'll know what to do, don't be afraid. Pray if you need to." 13. That was all the preparation I got from a married woman I trusted with my life. What I loved about him, and I did love him, or I think I did. I don't know if I knew what love was yet, was the way he listened. He would actually look at my face when I talked. Most boys in our district looked at the floor or at their hands. Eli looked right at me, and when I said something funny, his eyes would crinkle before his mouth caught up. We made cider together that October, at his father's press. He let me crank the wheel, even though my arms were too thin for it, and when I couldn't get it past the hard spot, he put his hand over mine, just for a second, just enough that I felt the heat of his palm through my sleeve. Then he pulled back, like he'd touched a stove. I think that was the first time I understood he was as scared as I was. I just didn't have the words for what we were scared of. The week before the wedding was a blur of celery and bread dough and the smell of vinegar from the cleaning. The women came in waves to help. Cousins, aunts, the bishop's wife. There's a tradition that the bride's mother washes her hair the morning of, and Ma'am did, with the rainwater from the cistern because it's softer. She didn't say anything the whole time. I kept waiting. I thought, surely this is the moment she tells me. She rinsed my hair with a tin cup, and her hands shook a little, and when she was done, she kissed the top of my head and said, "You're a good girl, Sarah. Be a good girl tonight." Be a good girl, that was it. I waited for more. There was no more. She walked out of the washroom and shut the door behind her. And I sat there with wet hair until it dripped down my back, and I started to shiver. The wedding service ran 4 hours, and by the time the meal was done and the singing was over, and the last of the guests had hitched up their buggies, it was nearly midnight. Eli and I rode the half-mile back to his father's Dady house, where we'd be living the first year, in a quiet that was so thick I could hear his thumb tapping the reins. The lamp was already lit in the upstairs window. His mother had gone ahead to ready the room. I want to tell you what that room looked like, because I've thought about it 10,000 times since. The bed was iron, painted white, with the double wedding ring quilt folded down at the foot. There was a pitcher and basin on the dresser, white porcelain with a chip on the lip of the pitcher. The walls were that flat blue Amish women always paint bedroom walls. Almost gray, almost lavender, never quite either. A braided rag rug. One window, no curtain, just a green pull-down shade. The lamp on the dresser threw a circle of yellow on the ceiling, and everything outside that circle was the color of a closed eye. He came in after me, closed the door. Slow, the way you close a door when there's a baby sleeping. I was standing by the bed in the nightgown his mother had laid out. Long-sleeved, high-collared, white cotton so new it still smelled like the bolt. My feet were bare on the rag rug. He stood by the wash basin, and he didn't look at me. He looked at the pitcher. He pulled at that left sleeve again. I could see his throat work when he swallowed. He looked like a lost boy. That's the only way I can say it. A grown man in a black wedding suit, looking like he'd been left at a train station. "Sarah," he said, and then nothing for a long time. I felt my toes curl against the rug. I pressed my tongue to the roof of my mouth so hard I tasted something metal. "Sarah." Ma'am said. He stopped, started again. "She said we should just sleep tonight, that it's better. That there's no rush." I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't know there was a thing to be in a rush about. I just nodded. I said, "Okay, Eli." 2 words. I thought I was being a good wife. He let his breath out like he'd been holding it for an hour. He turned to the lamp. He blew it out. The room went black, and I climbed under the quilt in my nightgown, and he climbed under the quilt in his trousers and his shirt, and we lay there with a full hand's width of cold sheet between us. He did not touch me, not my hand, not my hair, nothing. I lay awake until the rooster. I kept thinking, is this it? Is this the secret? Is marriage just 2 people not touching in the dark? I didn't know enough to know that wasn't it. In the morning, his mother brought up coffee, and looked at the bed, and looked at us, and her face did something I couldn't read. Relief, maybe, or its opposite. She set the tray down and left. The second night was the same. The third night was the same. On the 4th night, he reached for me, and I had spent 3 days in a panic I couldn't name, because something was wrong in that house and nobody, not him, not her, not anyone, would say what. What I didn't know, what neither of us knew, was that Eli had been told something by his mother in the kitchen, morning of the wedding, that I would not learn about for 6 more years. Something about a cousin. Something about what had happened to a cousin on her wedding night that the family had decided would not happen again. The instruction Eli had been given was to wait, to let me get used to him, to not frighten me. And nobody told me that was the instruction. Nobody told me anything. So, for 3 nights, I lay next to my husband, convinced I had done something wrong in the vows, that God was holding something back from us, that I was being punished for a sin I couldn't even name because I didn't know what the sin would have been. He wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. He was, in his own scared and silent way, trying to protect me from something he himself didn't fully understand. Because his mother had not used words either. She had said, "Be gentle, wait." She doesn't know. 5 words, that's what he had to work with. 5 words to navigate a wedding night and a wife and a body and a marriage. What I would later learn, and I'll tell you the word for it when we get there, is that there is a concept called informed consent. There is a concept called arousal. There is a concept called communication between 2 married people about their own bodies. None of those concepts existed in the room where I spent the first 3 nights of my marriage. We were two children in grown clothes, sharing a bed, terrified of each other and of God, and of a silence so old neither of us could see the shape of it. And the grief of that. The grief of what those 3 nights could have been if anyone had just used their words. That grief is what I carried into every night that followed. The 4th night set the pattern for 7 years. Eli would reach. I would freeze. He would apologize without knowing what he was apologizing for. And I would tell him it was fine without knowing what fine was supposed to feel like. I learned to hold my breath. I learned to count the boards in the ceiling. There were 42, and the one over the dresser had a knot that looked like a thumbprint. I would find that knot and put my mind inside it until he was done. By the time our first baby came, I had built a whole second room inside my own head, where I went on the nights he reached for me. It had a yellow door. Nobody could come in. I would like to tell you I'm exaggerating for the camera. I'm not. That's the only way I knew how to be a wife. The bishop's wife once told me, in passing, that a good Amish woman endures with grace. I thought she was talking about childbirth. Turns out, she was talking about all of it. That's the community's best-selling lie, that enduring and loving are the same word. It was at a quilting bee, 4 years in, that I first understood I wasn't alone. We were doing a friendship star for Mary's sister-in-law, 8 of us around the frame, and someone, I want to say, it was Anna Byler, but it might have been her cousin Ruth. I get them confused because they wore the same shade of plum, someone said, low, half into her stitching. My Jacob waited a week. I thought I was going to die of shame. There was a pause, the kind of pause where 8 women all stopped breathing at the same time. Then Lydia Yoder said, 3 weeks for me. Just that, 3 weeks for me. And then another voice from the end of the frame, so quiet I almost missed it. I didn't know what was happening until our second child. Nobody looked up. Nobody. We just kept stitching. And I felt something crack open in my chest that I did not have a name for yet. I opened my mouth. I almost said it. I almost said, 3 nights. And nobody told me why. But Ma'am walked in with the lemonade pitcher right then, and the moment closed like a door. That night I lay next to Eli, and I tried to imagine the cousin, the one whose story had set the rule for my wedding night, without ever being told to. Me. I thought about her. Whoever she was, wherever she was, and I wondered if anyone had ever asked her what she would have wanted said. I wondered how many wedding nights in our district had been built around her silence. Anna's Jacob, Lydia's husband, the woman at the end of the frame, me. A whole generation of girls in white nightgowns staring at ceiling knots because one woman's pain had been turned into a rule instead of a conversation. By our 7th year, I had stopped asking God why. I had stopped asking anything. I just made bread and nursed babies and pulled the green shade down at night and went into the yellow door room in my head. I left when I was 29. That's a whole other story. I'll tell it one day when I'm braver. But 6 months after I left, I was sitting in a little office in a strip mall outside Lancaster, on a couch that smelled like lavender and old books, across from a woman named Dr. Halverson. And she said a sentence to me that I want you to hear exactly the way I heard it. She said, Sarah, what you're describing is called marital sexual trauma, rooted in lack of informed consent. I remember the word informed most. Informed. I remember my hands going cold. I remember the radiator clicking. I remember a fly on the windowsill that I stared at for what felt like an hour, while she waited. Informed. Consent. 2 words I had lived 29 years without ever hearing put together. I didn't cry in her office. I cried in the parking lot. I sat in my used Honda Civic. I'd had it 3 weeks and I still didn't know how to work the wipers. And I put my forehead on the steering wheel and I cried for the girl in the white nightgown standing on the rag rug. I cried for her like she was my daughter. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I thought I'd be angry. I was just sad. Devastatingly sad. Sad for the girl who counted ceiling boards. Sad for Eli, who had been handed a wife and 5 words and told to figure it out. Sad for his mother, who had been handed her own wedding night the same way, and had nothing better to pass down. That's the thing nobody tells you about leaving. The people who hurt you are usually people who were hurt the exact same way, and the math of that grief doesn't ever quite balance. I tried to explain it to a woman at my new job. 6 months after that, she was kind. She brought me coffee. I told her a little of it, the cleaned-up version, and she said, "Oh, honey, why didn't you just ask someone?" And I knew right then there was a wall between her world and mine that I would never get all the way across. Because in her world, you ask. In my world, asking was the sin. There was nobody to ask, and even if there had been, the asking itself would have marked me as a girl who was already ruined. I sat there with my coffee getting cold, and I smiled, and I said, "It's complicated. That's the thing nobody tells you. You leave one silence and you walk straight into another, because the people on the outside can't hear what you're saying, even when you finally have the words for it." I want to tell you what the community gave me too, because it did. It gave me real things. It gave me the smell of bread baking in a wood oven at 4 in the morning, the kind of bread you can't buy anywhere. The kind that makes your kitchen smell like every grandmother who ever lived. It gave me the sound of horses on frost-hard ground before sunrise. That quick, clean clop and the steam coming off their backs in the lantern light. It gave me my grandmother's hands when she prayed, the knuckles swollen from 60 years of canning, folded on the kitchen table so gently you'd think she was holding a bird. I am homesick for those things. I will be homesick for them until the day I die. That's the thing nobody tells you about leaving the old order. You don't stop loving it. You just stop being able to live inside it. And what was done to me, what was done to all of us, has a name now too. It was silence dressed up as holiness. 5 words. That's the whole thing. Beauty and harm can live in the same house, and mine did, and pretending otherwise would be its own kind of lie. I'm not building a life that's the opposite of where I came from. I'm building a life that takes the bread and the horses and my grandmother's hands and leaves the green pull-down shade. I still pray. I still bake. I still cry sometimes when I smell kerosene on a cold night. And I have a husband now. A second one. A chosen one. And the first thing he ever asked me, in bed, was a question. Just a question. And I cried so hard he thought he'd done something wrong. I had to tell him, no, you did the thing. You did the thing nobody ever did so. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous. If you grew up somewhere the word for what was going to happen to you was a word nobody would say out loud. I see you. I see the girl who counted ceiling boards. I see the woman who built a yellow door room inside her own head just to survive her own marriage. You are not broken. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You did not fail your wedding night. Your wedding night failed you. There is a difference. And I need you to feel that difference in your chest right now. And to the woman who's still inside it, I see you, and I am not here to pull you out. I am just here so you know the door exists. To the woman who left and is still grieving what she lost, I see you, and the grief is allowed, and the love is allowed, and both can be true. To the woman who's thinking about leaving, I see you, and you don't have to decide tonight. To the woman who's been married 20 years, and just heard a word in this video that named something you've carried alone. I see you, and you are not crazy, and it was real. To the woman who recognized herself 3 minutes ago and is sitting very still right now, breathe. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this. If there was a moment, a sentence, a smell, a memory that opened something in you, tell me. I read them, all of them. There is so much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started. There are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell, about Eli, about my mother, about the cousin I finally found. But I'm getting closer. Subscribe to Rebecca Amish Home so you're here when I am. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. You were never the silence. You were the voice underneath it.